In this quick tutorial, we're going to give you an overview of some of the things you'll encounter when working with the 2D layout inside of a Spire. We're going to look at the different entities that you can have inside of the 2D view and the things that affect those, and also how to control exactly what you see, how to zoom in, and how to work within the 2D view itself. Firstly, let's talk about some of the different entities that you'll encounter. Currently on our screen there are two things. This is a vector, which I've sketched inside of the Aspire software using the create vector functions. I've got many other different types of vector shapes I can create. I can even go in and, using what we call the node editing mode, very specifically change how a particular vector looks. A vector essentially though is just a two-dimensional outline. In the software I'm going to use that either to create toolpaths, so maybe it will act as a boundary on a toolpath, or I'm going to use it as part of the modeling tools in order to create shapes using the working model. We'll just delete that shape that we've got there. As well as the vectors, you can see here that I have what we call the Grayscale Previews for the 3D components. If we look in the 3D view, we can see those components there. We can even tile the two windows so that we can see both. And if we want to tile them so the 2D view is more prominent, we select that first. And now I can take my 2D and I can actually stretch and move that, and that will update in the 3D view. So you can see that the 2D grayscale preview of a component is intrinsically linked to the 3D object that it's associated with. If I make an edit to it, then that also changes the 3D. Most of the functions that are available for vector editing are also available to edit the grayscale preview. You'll find those under the edit vectors area of the menu here. Same as the alignment options, which also can be used both for vectors and the grayscale previews. There are two other types of entity that you'll encounter in the 2D view. One is what we call the grayscale preview of the working model, and the other are bitmaps. Let's look at the working model first. When I need to create new shapes inside of a Spire, I need to use the working model. In this case, I might want to take the vector outline for the stalk, use the create shape function, and hit add. At this point in time, that is only part of the working model, which means I can't select that particular thing and move it around, unlike I can with the grapes and the leaf in this case. Only at the point that that converts into a component will it become an object that I can move and edit in the same way as I can the other components. However, as long as that's part of the working model, I can continue to make edits to it. In the 2D view, the main thing that differentiates these two things, and we can just maximize the view here, is the fact that the grayscale preview of that working model is yellow tinged. I can affect how strongly it shows the 3D shape by sliding this little background slider, and that also affects how yellow the tinge is on that particular preview. Only when there's something in the model will I see something previewed like this, and as you can see, anything that's over the top of that in terms of these grayscales will automatically obscure it. So I'm only going to see that if there's nothing else in the way in the 2D view. So if we go ahead and turn the working model into a component, we'll just call that stalk, then you'll see that the grayscale color will change, and now it's an object I can select, and just like the others, I can actually change the size of that. You'll notice as I do that it isn't linked to the original vector it was created from, so they have no relationship once the model has been built from that particular shape. In fact, we could even delete that vector if we wanted to now. The other entity that you're going to see within the 2D view is a bitmap or an image. If I import one from the disk here, you'll see that displayed in the 2D view. And it's always going to be obscured by anything that's on a layer in front of it. By default, an imported image will be put on a layer called bitmap. If I was to come in here, pop up the layer manager and just undraw the layers that have got those grayscales on, then we can see that bitmap clearly, and we can see I have the same editing tools that I've got with a vector in terms of being able to stretch it, center an object, and use the other alignment tools and editing tools that are available to me even for standard vectors. The point of importing a bitmap is that I might want to use it in order to help me sketch vectors over the top of it, in order to perhaps match elements of the shape within there. Or I may want to use it in order to generate an automatic texture. And you can see as we created that vector, it automatically switched on the layer that's currently selected. We'll just undraw that again. So that's the point of having a bitmap. When I import it, I can trace vectors over it, or I can use it to automatically generate a 3D texture. In this case, I'm just going to delete that, and we'll come back to our layers, switch those on again so we can see our grayscales. The last thing I want to show you in this overview is some of the manipulation of the 2D view in terms of zooming in and zooming onto particular objects. I can just click in the 2D view and use the wheel on the mouse in order to zoom in and out just by rolling it forwards and backwards. It's also possible under the 2D view control to zoom into a particular area of the part. If I click on this, then it's just going to zoom to fit everything in, or if I click on a specific item, so if we go to the selection mode and click on the stalk and I choose this icon, it will zoom the selected object so that it fits inside the screen. So it's very easy for me to get to see exactly what I want inside of the 2D view. Last thing we're going to mention here, a couple of other items. If I click on the rule, I can bring a guideline down, which helps me when I'm drawing items. I've also got the ability in here to switch on the guidelines so that they're visible or invisible from the view menu. Another option which is helpful when laying the part out in 2D is a snap grid. If we come up to the edit menu, come down to snap options, then we can switch on a menu where I can control how different objects snap. If I switch on the snap grid, you can see a grid of spots is created in the background, and now if I dragged or drew different items within the 2D view, they would snap to those particular nodes. Makes it very quick for me to lay out a two-dimensional drawing. One last thing to mention in the 2D view is the right mouse click menu. This will be different depending what I have selected. If I just click the right mouse, you can see we get this drop down menu. If I select an object like the grayscale and click, you can see I get a slightly different menu that has options that relate specifically to the object that's currently selected. So if I have a bitmap selected or if I have a vector selected, then I'll get different options. We'd strongly advise you to look at the relevant sections in the reference manual or the help for specific details about how to use these. Plus, many of the options you've seen inside this short overview will also be covered in the more detailed tutorials as you work through the rest of the video examples. That concludes this short overview.